People think lawyers never lose. They're wrong. Some battles aren't fought in court. My name is Olivia Carter, and for 12 years I built a career protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. I defended families from dishonest landlords, helped small business owners survive lawsuits, and fought corporations that thought money could buy justice. I loved my work. My husband didn't. Daniel and I met in law school. We were broke, ambitious, and convinced we'd conquer the world together. Back then, success meant building a life side by side. Somewhere along the way, success became a number on a bank account. You could be making twice as much, Daniel said almost every week. I already make enough. Enough isn't success. That became his favorite sentence. He accepted a consulting job with a large real estate investment company. The paycheck was enormous, but so was the distance growing between us. Late nights became normal. Business dinners replaced our evenings together. His phone was always face down. I knew something was wrong. I just didn't want to admit it. Everything ended on a rainy Tuesday. I came home after winning a difficult case for an elderly widow whose house had almost been taken by a bank. I expected to celebrate with takeout and a movie. Instead, Daniel was sitting on the couch beside 2 suitcases. "We need to talk," he said. Every terrible conversation starts with those words. "I'm leaving." For a second I thought he meant another business trip. Then I noticed he wasn't wearing his wedding ring. "I've met someone." The room became completely silent. "Who?" "Her name is Vanessa." "How long?" He hesitated. 8 months. 8 months. While I was saving strangers, my own marriage had quietly fallen apart. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said. "But you did." He looked around the apartment we'd spent years building together. "Vanessa wants the same future I do." I couldn't stop myself from asking. "And what future is that?" He answered without any guilt. "A bigger life." I laughed bitterly. "You mean a richer one?" He didn't deny it. That hurt more than any argument. He picked up his suitcases and walked toward the door. "I hope someday you'll understand." I opened the door for him. "I hope someday you'll regret it." He left without looking back. I stood alone in the apartment for nearly an hour, staring at the empty space where his suitcase had been. The next morning, instead of crying, I did what lawyers always do. I went to work. I didn't know it yet, but before the week was over, a quiet elderly woman would walk into my office carrying a thin folder. Inside that folder was a case everyone else had refused. A case that would change my life forever. 3 days after Daniel left, I buried myself in work. It was easier than sitting alone in an apartment that suddenly felt twice as large. Every room reminded me of promises that no longer existed. My assistant, Megan, knocked on my office door. "You have a walk-in client," she said. "I don't have an appointment." "I know. But I think you should meet her." A few moments later, an elderly woman slowly entered my office. She looked to be in her early 60s, neatly dressed but exhausted. She held a worn leather folder so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. "My name is Grace Miller," she said. "Everyone keeps telling me I don't have a case." I invited her to sit. "Tell me what happened." She carefully placed several documents on my desk. "My husband built our house 40 years ago. We raised our children there. Last month I received a notice saying the property now belongs to a development company." I frowned. "Did you sell it?" "No." "Did you sign anything?" "Never." I examined the documents. According to the paperwork, Grace had supposedly agreed to sell the property 6 months earlier. The signature looked convincing. Too convincing. "Who prepared these documents?" I asked. "A company called Langford Development." The name caught my attention. Victor Langford owned one of the largest real estate companies in the state. He had expensive lawyers and an even more expensive reputation for winning. Have you spoken to another attorney? She nodded. 5 of them. And? They all said the same thing. She looked down at her hands. They said I can't beat Victor Langford. I remained silent for a moment. Then I asked the only question that mattered. Did you sign these papers? She looked directly into my eyes. No. There wasn't even a second of hesitation. Lawyers learn to recognize lies. Grace wasn't lying. I continued reading. The dates didn't make sense. The witness signatures were completed on a federal holiday. The notary's office listed on the documents had been closed that entire week because of renovations. Small details. But details win lawsuits. Mrs. Miller, I said, closing the folder, I think someone forged these documents. Her eyes immediately filled with tears. So, you'll help me? I leaned back in my chair. If we're going to do this, understand something. She nodded. Victor Langford has unlimited money. He'll hire the best attorneys. He'll delay hearings, pressure witnesses, and try to make us quit. Grace smiled for the first time. I've lived in that house for 40 years. She folded her hands calmly. I'm too old to be intimidated. I smiled back. Good. I extended my hand. Because neither am I. The moment she shook my hand, neither of us realized we had just declared war against one of the most powerful businessmen in the state. The next morning, I began digging into Langford development. The deeper I looked, the stranger everything became. Grace Miller wasn't the only homeowner facing eviction. Within 2 hours, I found 6 nearly identical lawsuits. Elderly homeowners. Valuable land. The same legal team. The same type of sales agreement signed only months before construction projects were announced. Too many coincidences. I called Ethan Brooks, the attorney who had mentored me during my first years in practice. Have you ever gone against Victor Langford? I asked. There was a long pause. Once. And? I lost. Because he had the better case? No. Ethan lowered his voice. Because witnesses suddenly changed their stories. That answer stayed with me. Something about this case didn't feel legal. It felt organized. Later that afternoon, Megan walked into my office carrying another folder. I found the attorneys representing Langford. I opened the file without thinking. Then I froze. One name was listed as senior legal consultant. Daniel Carter. For a moment, I thought I was reading it wrong. I checked again. Same name. Same law license number. My ex-husband wasn't just working for Langford. He was helping defend the company trying to take Grace's home. Megan noticed my expression. Olivia, are you okay? I slowly closed the folder. I'm fine. It was a lie. Daniel knew exactly how I worked. He knew how I prepared cases. He knew my strengths. And now he was sitting on the opposite side. That evening, as I left the courthouse, I heard someone call my name. Olivia. I turned around. Daniel. He looked confident in his expensive suit, as if nothing had happened between us. I heard you're representing Grace Miller, he said. So you've been keeping track. He sighed. I'm trying to help you. I don't need your help. You should drop the case. I folded my arms. Why? Because you can't win. His voice sounded almost sympathetic. Langford always wins. I stepped closer. I've heard that before. He looked frustrated. This isn't personal. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. You left me for 8 months without telling me the truth. You now work for the man trying to steal an elderly woman's house. And you're telling me this isn't personal? Daniel looked away. Just walk away, Olivia. I smiled. For the first time since our divorce, I felt completely calm. You married the wrong woman if you thought I'd ever do that. Without another word, I walked past him. I didn't look back. But deep down, I knew one thing. This case had just become much bigger than a property dispute. Someone was desperate to stop me before the trial had even begun. The following week, I filed a motion to stop Grace Miller's eviction until the court could review the ownership documents. Langford's legal team responded within hours. They wanted the case dismissed immediately. That told me one thing. They were nervous. I spent the next several days examining every page of the contract. At first glance, everything looked perfect. The signatures matched. The witnesses were listed. The paperwork appeared complete. But perfect documents often hide imperfect details. One signature caught my attention. The notary who supposedly witnessed Grace signing the agreement had officially retired nearly a month before the document was dated. I checked again. Then a third time. The retirement records were public. There was no mistake. Someone had used the name of a notary who was no longer authorized to certify documents. I immediately contacted the county office. An hour later, an employee confirmed what I already suspected. The official notary seal on Grace's contract had never been issued by their office. It was fake. For the first time since accepting the case, I had real evidence. I called Grace immediately. They forged the paperwork, I said. I knew I wasn't crazy, she whispered. You were never crazy. She began crying quietly. I thought nobody believed me. I do. The next morning, I submitted the evidence to the court. By noon, every attorney representing Langford had received a copy. Including Daniel. Around 6 that evening, I left my office and walked toward the parking garage. Halfway to my car, I noticed a black SUV parked nearby. A man I had never seen before stepped out. Ms. Carter? Yes. He smiled politely. Mr. Langford would like to settle. I raised an eyebrow. We haven't even had our first hearing. Exactly. He handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a settlement offer. Langford would pay Grace enough money to buy another home. There was one condition. She had to drop the lawsuit immediately. I looked back at the man. Tell Mr. Langford something for me. I'm listening. If he was innocent. I folded the envelope and handed it back. He wouldn't be trying this hard to make the case disappear. The man's smile vanished. Without another word, he returned to the SUV and drove away. As I watched the vehicle disappear into traffic, my phone vibrated. It was an anonymous text message. Walk away while you still can. No name. No number. Just a warning. I stared at the screen for several seconds. Then I smiled. For the first time, I knew we were getting close to the truth. And someone was beginning to panic. The anonymous messages didn't stop. Over the next week, I received 5 more. Drop the case. You're making a mistake. Some fights aren't worth winning. I saved every message and forwarded them to the police, although I knew they probably wouldn't find the sender. Whoever was behind them knew exactly how to stay invisible. Meanwhile, Ryan Foster, an investigative journalist, called my office. I've been following Langford for years, he said. Then you know something. I know people are afraid to talk. We agreed to meet that evening. Ryan arrived carrying a box filled with newspaper clippings, financial records, and handwritten notes. I've interviewed dozens of homeowners, he explained. They all tell the same story. He handed me several photographs. Each one showed a different family standing in front of a house that no longer belonged to them. They all supposedly signed contracts? He nodded. Every single one. And none of them admit signing. Exactly what I had been expecting. Then Ryan placed one final document on the table. This is why I called. It was a list of properties purchased by Langford Development during the last 5 years. I counted them twice. 23 homes. Almost all had belonged to elderly owners. My stomach tightened. This isn't one fraudulent contract. Ryan slowly shook his head. It's a business model. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. If we could prove the company had repeatedly forged documents, Grace's lawsuit would become much bigger than a single property dispute. It could expose an entire criminal operation. The next morning, the court scheduled our first hearing. Langford's legal team filled one side of the courtroom. Daniel was sitting among them. When our eyes met, he looked away first. The judge entered, and everyone stood. Before the hearing officially began, Langford's lead attorney approached me. "Last chance," he said quietly. "Withdraw." I smiled politely. "No." He leaned closer. "You have no idea who you're fighting." I looked directly at him. "I think I do." The hearing lasted less than 30 minutes. After reviewing the evidence about the fake notary seal, the judge denied Langford's request to dismiss the case. Instead, she ordered both sides to begin full discovery. It wasn't a victory. But it was exactly what I wanted. Discovery meant access to internal company records. As the hearing ended, I packed my files. For the first time since this case began, I noticed something unusual. Victor Langford wasn't looking at the judge. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at Daniel. And Daniel looked terrified. In that moment, I realized something. My ex-husband wasn't running the scheme. He was trapped inside it. 3 nights after the hearing, my phone rang just after midnight. The caller ID surprised me. Daniel. I almost ignored it. Almost. "What do you want?" I asked. His voice was shaky. "We need to meet." "I don't think that's a good idea." "It isn't about us." He paused. "It's about your case." That got my attention. We met the next morning at a quiet coffee shop across town. Daniel looked nothing like the confident attorney I'd seen in court. He hadn't shaved. Dark circles surrounded his eyes. "You were right," he said quietly. "I usually am." He didn't smile. "You don't understand who Victor Langford really is." "Then explain." Daniel looked around to make sure no one was listening. "I didn't know what they were doing when I joined the company. And now? I know too much." I remained silent. He took a deep breath. "The contracts are fake." Those 4 words confirmed everything I'd suspected. Who creates them? I don't know everyone involved. But I know executives approve them. And the homeowners? They're targeted because they live alone or don't have anyone to fight back. I clenched my jaw. So Grace wasn't the first. Daniel slowly shook his head. "Not even close." I leaned forward. "If you know all this, testify." His expression immediately changed. "I can't." "Why not?" "They'll destroy me." I couldn't help it. "You helped them destroy innocent people." "I know." His voice cracked for the first time. "I made the biggest mistake of my life." For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, Daniel reached into his briefcase. "I copied these before anyone noticed." He slid a flash drive across the table. "What's on it?" "Internal emails. Property reports. Approval records. If they're still there, they prove everything." I didn't touch it. "Why are you giving this to me?" He looked down. "Because I finally realized something." "What?" "I left the only honest person I ever knew." I picked up the flash drive. "This won't erase what happened." "I know. And if these files are fake." "They aren't." He stood up. "After today, don't contact me." "Daniel. They'll know I talked." He walked toward the exit. Just before opening the door, he turned around one last time. "Be careful, Olivia." Then he disappeared into the morning crowd. I hurried back to my office. Megan locked the door while I connected the flash drive to my computer. Hundreds of files appeared on the screen. Contracts. Emails. Financial records. Then I opened one folder labeled Approved Acquisitions. My heart nearly stopped. Grace Miller wasn't the only victim. There were 41 homeowners on the list. And every single file had been personally approved by Victor Langford himself. The courtroom was full before the trial even began. Reporters lined the back wall. Homeowners filled every empty seat. Word had spread that this case was no longer about one house. It was about dozens of families. Victor Langford entered with a team of expensive attorneys. For the first time since I had met him, he didn't look confident. He looked angry. Judge Eleanor Hayes called the court to order. I presented the first pieces of evidence, the forged notary seal, the false property records, and the timeline proving the contracts could not have been legally executed. Langford's attorneys argued that the mistakes were simple clerical errors. Then it was my turn. Your Honor, I said, the defense claims these are isolated accidents. I placed a thick binder on the evidence table. They are not. Inside were the files from Daniel's flash drive. 41 property acquisitions. The same pattern. The same forged paperwork. The same approvals. The courtroom became completely silent. The judge slowly turned the pages. Counsel, she said to Langford's attorney, would you like to explain these documents? No one answered. Instead, Victor Langford stood up. They were obtained illegally. I expected that argument. Whether they were obtained legally or not, I replied, doesn't change what they prove. At that moment, Ryan Foster entered the courtroom carrying another folder. He had located 3 former employees willing to testify. One by one, they described how signatures had been copied from old documents and placed onto new contracts. How elderly homeowners were deliberately targeted. How anyone who questioned the system was fired. By the afternoon, the defense had stopped pretending everything was normal. Then came the final witness. Daniel Carter. He walked slowly to the stand. I hadn't known whether he would actually appear. After taking the oath, he looked directly at the judge. I worked for Langford Development. He took a deep breath. And everything Ms. Carter has presented is true. Victor Langford immediately stood. He's lying. But it was too late. Daniel described the meetings, the fake contracts, and the pressure placed on employees to stay silent. Every answer pushed Langford's case closer to collapse. When testimony ended, the judge announced a short recess before delivering her decision. For the first time in months, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to feel. Hope. When the court returned, the entire room stood. Judge Eleanor Hayes took her seat and opened the case file one last time. The evidence presented during this trial establishes a clear pattern of fraud, she said. She looked toward Victor Langford. The contracts used to obtain these properties cannot be considered valid. A wave of silence swept through the courtroom. Then came the words Grace had waited months to hear. The court rules in favor of the plaintiff. Grace closed her eyes and quietly began to cry. Her home was hers again. But the judge wasn't finished. She ordered every disputed property connected to the fraudulent documents to be reviewed immediately. The case was also referred to state prosecutors for a criminal investigation into Langford Development. Victor Langford said nothing. 2 investigators waiting outside the courtroom approached him as soon as the hearing ended. For the first time, the man who believed money could solve everything had no answer. Outside, reporters surrounded Grace. She ignored every microphone and walked straight toward me. You believed me, she whispered. When nobody else did. I smiled. You always had the truth. A week later, the news was everywhere. More homeowners came forward. Former employees agreed to cooperate with investigators. Several executives resigned. Daniel accepted responsibility for his role and agreed to testify in future criminal cases. His law license was suspended, but his cooperation helped expose the entire scheme. As for me, I returned to my office. The awards on the wall hadn't changed. The furniture hadn't changed. But I had. One afternoon, Megan placed another folder on my desk. "New client," she said. I opened it. Another family. Another unfair fight. I smiled. "Send them in." Before the door opened, I looked through the window at the city outside. Months earlier, I thought losing my marriage was the worst thing that could happen to me. I was wrong. Sometimes life tears one chapter away because a better one is waiting to be written. Daniel chose money. I chose justice. In the end, only one of us could look in the mirror without regret. And if there's one lesson I learned from this case, it's this. The law isn't powerful because every guilty person fears it. It's powerful because all it takes is one person willing to stand up for the truth.